It's not often that new games get entire subgenres named after them, but with our understanding of game mechanics becoming more sophisticated and detailed than ever, I imagine it'll be an increasing trend. The two biggest examples of this are Metroidvanias, a subset of side-scrolling action platformers inspired by games like Super Metroid or Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and Souls-likes, named for the infamously difficult Souls series put out by From Software. Lately, it's become very popular to combine the level structure and 2D style of Metroidvanias with the difficulty and cryptic world building of a Souls-like into a genre I like to call a Soulsroidvania. A Metro Souls-like. A Soulsvania-like? Whatever these games end up being called isn't important and isn't up to me. What is important is that we're looking at one such game today. Ender Lilies, Quietest of the Nights, developed by Livewire and published by Binary Haze Interactive. I'm NPC Aaron, and this is a Choice Review. This is definitely not the first of these games to exist. Games like Salt and Sanctuary and Blasphemous have forged a path for this particular combination of genres, but I want to be clear, this is one of those. The focus of this game isn't on innovation or large-scale twists to the form, it's on delivering a mechanically tight game with the trappings expected of it. As such, you'll find a health-restoring mechanic just like Estus flasks, checkpoints that respawn enemies just like bonfires, enemies that hit for punishing amounts of damage if you misjudge their attack patterns, and a relatively vague narrative mostly delivered via in-game documents and a few conversations. You'll also find these hubs work as fast travel points, that you'll be regularly backtracking across the map to use newly acquired path-opening upgrades, and that you'll be expanding your ammo capacities and health bar with regularity via hidden items stashed all around the map. It's what it says on the tin. But that doesn't mean there aren't some more granular game design choices that I want to point out. First off, let's touch on the combat. You are a young girl with no weapons in this game, instead equipping the various spirits you pacify after beating them as bosses or mini-bosses. So the hitbox associated with a given attack doesn't really radiate directly from your character sprite the way you would expect in a game like this. It forms as an apparition somewhere around you and attacks from there. This has big implications for how you engage with enemies, since dodging and parrying are key parts of surviving a difficult game like this one. Using certain spirits' attacks lets you buy yourself some distance of engagement that can be crucial for evading counterattacks. It also just feels really satisfying. Attacks sometimes feel like they have huge sweeping reach, and when you do manage to sort of stun lock an enemy with these larger attacks, you can't help but be satisfied. The second development choice I want to talk about is traversal, a very important aspect of Metroidvania games since it's one of the big ways areas are cordoned off from the player early in the game. Your traversal abilities in Ender Lilies are, in an objective sense, not very good. You start with a very sad, short, single jump, and even when you get a double jump, the arc of it is very flat compared to characters like Samus. But this just sings in the game somehow, because the environments in this game are stunning. So the relatively tame traversal you have, at least for the first half of the game, mean you're really having to decipher the environments and take in their beauty. It also emphasizes that you, as a character, as Lily, are in over your head, much like how you feel in most Souls games. It starts you out with a very sad jump so that you appreciate the traversal you accomplish gaining in the same way you appreciate defeating a very tough boss after 30 failed attempts. I will say up front that this is not a genre of game I find inherently endearing. I've enjoyed a handful of Souls-like games and a handful of Metroidvanias as well, but they don't pique my interest without offering something else usually. I'm one of those filthy casuals who argues there's no reason that these games can't have scaling difficulty so that more people can enjoy them. But I could look at a game that isn't meant for me and analyze it on its own terms. I believe empathy is the basis for good game design, so I also believe it should be the emphasis for good analysis and criticism of games. I already covered a bit of the choices players make talking about the combat, so I want to zoom out for a bit of this section and talk about equipping the various spirits and relics. You start the game with 2 relic slots, and can find collectible items that unlock more as you progress through the game. You use these slots to equip relics that give various boosts, some small but constant, and some strong but circumstantial. Some relics even use more than 1 slot. Similarly, you gain spirits who give you access to new attacks. You can equip 2 sets of 3 spirits each, which use the face buttons on a controller, and you can swap between those 3 sets with one of the shoulder buttons. The system sounds very modular and interesting, but there's an issue here I find pretty common among games with these sorts of slotted systems. With the high level of difficulty, I never found that I had enough slots to equip the more circumstantial or interesting relics, or the more unconventional spirits. I just didn't have the wiggle room to experiment. Maybe if I were better at the game, I'd feel differently, but I needed the extra hit points and defense and such, so equipping an item that makes me stronger in water just felt like a wasted slot. Equipping a spirit that has an odd attack pattern might be very good in certain situations, and totally worth one of my 3 slots during certain sections, but the basics of the game are challenging enough that I never felt like I could experiment. Ender Lilies Quietus of the Nights just released on Steam for $24.99, and is also available on Xbox or Switch. Its PS4 version is coming later this year. Is it worth that price? Well, that depends. There's plenty I didn't cover on this game, from the beautiful soundtrack to the visually impressive bosses. There's definitely $25 worth of craft in the game. But if you don't care for difficult games or Metroidvanias, this one isn't going to change your mind. If you like this type of game, though, you'll probably love this. I personally enjoyed it more than its predecessors that I've played, like Salt and Sanctuary, but I'd still suggest maybe waiting for a sale unless you'd consider yourself an enthusiast for this specific type of game. Overall, I give the game a 7 out of 10. I'm NPC Aaron, and thank you for watching this choice review.